What if a simple clock test drawing revealed that the brain was struggling? And what if the brain had another fuel source that it could use? In today's conversation, Dr. Mary Newport shares the personal experience that led her to explore ketones, MCT oil, and Alzheimer's health. Y'all, I'm excited about this interview. Stay tuned. If you're tired of sugar cravings, brain fog, fatigue, and all the conflicting health and diet advice, and you just want to know what's happening inside of your body, you're in the right place. I'm TaShawn Davis, holistic health coach, registered nurse, and metabolic health educator. I help you break sugar cravings through balanced blood sugar so you can take your health back naturally. So grab your favorite sugar-free drink, pop in those earbuds, and let's learn how to work with our body and not against it. Dr. Mary Newport, physician, author, you're an international speaker, and a pioneer in the ketogenic nutrition and brain health. Yes, and
Hi,
Dr.
Tashawn. Thank you.
Newport has spent over 30 years as a neonatologist caring for premature and critically ill newborns. Her life miss and so that's pretty much, do you do that now or you're not doing that right now?
No, I'm retired from that. I don't
Oh,
want to say
okay.
I'm retired, but I'm not doing that particular type of patient care, at this point.
Oh, okay. And so your mission kind of changed when you had that diagnosis
Wow,
of your husband, when
it
Steve was
did.
diagnosed with that early onset Alzheimer's disease.
Correct.
And then
That
when you
changed
found out,
everything.
that's what it was, you were not accepting that. You began to search, right? And it led you to the ketogenic nutrition, the coconut oil, the MCTs. And
Yeah.
so to provide the brain with the alternative fuel source of those ketones. Um, and then
Right.
Steve experienced those amazing improvements,
Mhm.
giving your family another 4 years with him.
Right.
And today you're continuing to educate families and healthcare professionals around the world. And
Yeah.
you have authored 4 books, and this is where I had to make sure I got it right because I
Mhm.
love it. I
Mhm.
had two, and it's trying to remember the full titles of
Oh.
my two is hard. So your books are with Clearly Keto for Healthy Brain Aging and Alzheimer's Prevention. The Complete Book of Ketones is the second.
Mhm.
The Coconut Oil and Low Carb Solution for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Other Diseases. And I love this title, the last one, Alzheimer's Disease. What if there was a cure? And then you also are the co-founder of Trevita Therapeutics.
That's no longer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that we kind of parted ways. So
Okay, all right. So, but
yeah.
that's part of your resume.
I was
So,
doing that, yeah, for the last year or so.
okay, awesome, awesome. I mean, I'm inspired. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
just want to personally thank you because long before I knew your name, honestly, I knew your story. And every opportunity I got to speak, I
Mhm,
said there was a lady who helped her husband.
mhm,
It was a clock test that she did, and she was able to show improvement with that clock test after treating him with the coconut oil and the low
mhm.
carb ketogenic diet.
Right.
So yeah, for years I just referred to you like that.
Ah,
But I knew your work, and I
uh-huh.
just thank God for your willingness to share the story and your family's journey because it
Mhm,
planted a seed in me. And eventually, as a registered nurse, when I struggle with my own memory,
mhm.
and learning about ketones and that alternative fuel, it led me into this metabolic journey and helped me to help so many more. So your success in doing this is part of mine. So
I love hearing
really,
that. I
yeah,
love hearing that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I help people do the same thing because of you were the one that planted that small seed. And so your
Mhm.
impact is going farther than you could ever realize.
Thank you. I know I figured each one person I talked to would tell a few more people, and it was very much a grassroots thing in the beginning after
Yeah.
my husband improved. And people weren't talking about keto diet or anything like that, much less MCT oil. And there was a study in medical food that was going to come out that I learned about. And in their patent application, I learned that there's a problem with glucose getting into the brain in Alzheimer's, and all cells need fuel. It's usually glucose in the brain, but ketones could provide that fuel, and MCTs are converted to ketones. So it's like, okay, this makes scientific sense. And I learned that MCT was extracted from coconut oil, and that's what I could get at the time. This was 2008. So it was really hard. Even you could find, coconut oil in health food stores, but MCT oil was really hard to come by. So, that's kind of the root of the story with my husband. And he did. He improved dramatically, for nearly 4 years, and then he did have a big decline really after a seizure with a head injury, where he was standing. And so he did pass away from Alzheimer's 8 years after, we started the coconut oil. But we got 4 much better years,
Wow.
because of it, coconut and MCT oil. And then he was the first person in the world to get to test ketone ester from the NIH that was developed by Dr. Richard Beach. So these
Wow.
ketone esters are out on the market now. They came out starting around 2018, but Dr. Richard Beach was a world expert on ketones. In 2008, I connected with him pretty quickly after Steve started to improve. And he told me about his ketone ester. And then, we just communicated pretty constantly. I actually wrote books to try to started writing the books to try to get funding for Alzheimer's study of his ketone ester, which was expensive to make, needed to be mass produced. So my goal was really to try to inspire research in the area and to try to get funding, for him, to be able to do a study with Alzheimer's. And 2 years later, after the coconut oil, when my husband was, basically, well, Dr. Veach had finished toxicity testing studies and it was safe, to use this ketone ester. So he said, how about if we give your husband this, do a pilot study? And so we agreed and he started taking it and he had more improvements at the time and it kept him very stable for another 20 months, before he started having the problems, that I uh, told you about there. But, it was just amazing. It did get published in the journal Alzheimer's and Dementia as a case report. His
Nice.
response to medium chain triglycerides, coconut oil, MCT oil, and then his response to the ketone ester. And I got to be an author on a paper with Dr. Veach, which was like, that was, one of the highlights, one of many,
Nice.
but one of the important highlights of my life, I would say, you know,
Yeah, because he was pioneering that thing
he
and
was
even,
pioneering it.
yeah, to be able to help and to, try to back him in the way that you did with writing about it.
Yeah.
But you were able to be on his paper. So that's so inspiring. Like it's not
It was,
stopping is the
yeah,
thing too.
right, right.
Yeah.
So now
It's
there are
not.
a lot of them out on the market. Well, several different types of ketone esters that people can get. And so many people still don't know about it.
I
But
was gonna say, could you tell us the difference between like a
Mhm.
BH, like the ketones, the
Mhm.
BHB, and the esters? Is there a difference?
There's different types of what we call exogenous ketone supplements. So
Mm-hmm.
when during fasting and starvation, we naturally go into ketosis. If you fast overnight, even for 10 or 12 hours, you start breaking down some fat when you use up your stores of glucose. And some of that fat is converted to ketones, which your brain can use as fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, one natural way to produce ketones. Ketogenic diet, if you eat a very high fat, low carb diet, people will go into ketosis and they'll have a blood level of ketones that can supply, fuel to the brain as well. And then there are, just since 2016, out on the market, ketone supplements. And one, the main ketone that the body produces from fat is beta hydroxybutyrate or BHB.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, basically the first supplements of actual BHB that you could take orally came out in 2016 and they are ketone salts.
Mm-hmm.
And
I hear they're very nasty.
well, they're a little salty, so they have to
Yeah.
be flavored and they're
Right.
not horrible. They're not horrible, but you know,
If you
um,
need them,
if you need them, right,
right.
right. And
Take
there's
it.
different inventive ways to use them. I had a friend who she really didn't like drinking it, diluted in water. They're usually flavored too. They try to mask it. But she would make gelatin from it, orange gelatin, which worked really well.
I'm gonna have to use that as a tip for some of the people that I recommended too.
Yeah, yeah, that was an easy way to do it. And then the ketone ester that my husband took, that one does taste not so great. And when he
Mm.
took it, they sent me the raw material from the NIH, just a big container of it, and I had to dilute it and try to flavor it, and it tasted like, I mean, like the worst kind of jet fuel you can think of. I mean,
Oh my gosh, that's
it
worse than salt.
it was really bad, and my husband knew he had Alzheimer's, and we had talked so much about all of this, and he had met Dr. Veach a couple times. He couldn't wait to try it, and he was
Mm.
very excited. I mean, it really turned him around in so many ways. And yeah, well, improved him more than he had improved, you know. Um, and so he shuddered every time he took it, but he took it willingly. But
Mm.
he'd just go moo every time he took it. He'd like chug it, and you know. So it's improved. It's out on the market since 2018. Like there are two versions of it that are exactly what Dr. Veach invented, I guess you would say. One's like, should I mention brand names or not really?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah,
I
one's called ketone aid. So they have a product called KE4, and that's the one, basically Dr. Veach gave them his blessing to go ahead and make it. And um, the second person in the world to take it was the mother-in-law of the man who decided to start the company. He was having a chemist make more of it for his mother-in-law. They couldn't provide enough from the NIH, and so he started doing that. And she had ALS, and
mm.
she improved for a while, and then she did pass away from it. But he decided to make a company from it and launch it on the market as a sports drink. They can't make claims because they're supplements. They can't say this is for this disorder. They
Right.
can say things like this contributes to brain energy or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
they can't say it's for Alzheimer's or it's for ALS or whatever. So got put out as a sports drink, and then there's another version of it. Dr. Kieran Clark developed a product. It's Delta G or T Delta S sometimes, but it's the same product, and neither of them taste great, but KE4 tastes a little better and it's less expensive. So,
Yeah.
that's my take on that. And then there's some other ways of doing esters, and so when you make an ester, basically you take an alcohol and an acid and you put them into one molecule, and that makes an ester. So
Mm.
there's another company that makes one with an MCT oil combined with one of the components of the ketone ester. And that one's like far and away the best tasting of all of them.
Oh,
It's Quitone, and the least expensive, the best tasting. It's just a flavorless powder that you can put into coffee or tea. And it's very slightly bitter, but coffee and tea tend to be a little bit bitter, so you don't really notice it, and it just makes it creamy. It's a powder, and you just blend it in, and it raises, ketone levels quite well. So,
that's nice.
yeah, that's one of my favorites. And then, of course, well, then there's some other mixtures of the two components of the ketone ester, but they're in a mixture instead of fused together as a molecule, as an ester molecule. And like kinetic is one of those. So, and there's all these different options now. And then a lot of companies are making ketone salts. You can find
Yes.
them in regular drugstores and even grocery stores sometimes.
Oh, I guess I
Yeah.
haven't been looking. Probably the last time I would say was probably around 2016. The way I teach and coach is
Mhm.
I always want to see what the body can do first on its own before I even introduce
Mhm.
supplements.
Yeah.
So supplements are like the very last thing I'm
Yeah.
researching and doing. I know about the oils, of course, because that is a
Yeah.
more natural thing, and I do
It's a
feel like
food.
it's a place for it. But
Right.
I always want to like shake out the cells just to see
Mhm.
like what can you do,
Yeah.
because if we don't, then we'll never know, and we could be spending our time, make pushing out all of this money into these companies where we may not need to, not right away,
No, very true.
So at the beginning, it's like, let's find out what your body can do. But, we live in a microwave world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's just get it. And then, I like Dr. Bosworth's information too on something
Oh,
like
right.
this, where it's
Yeah, I
like,
know
yeah, but if
Dr.
it,
Boswell.
if you have a child with, autism or something like that, it may be harder to get them to eat the things. So I
Yeah.
would say definitely like someone like
Mm-hmm.
that, let's go ahead and start them with something so at least that they can start getting that alternative fuel into their
Right.
body. But, and another thing, like, it's oftentimes we know that this is the best. How long have you been in the ketogenic world?
Since 2008, so 18
Eight.
years.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, yeah, just for me, over a decade. It
Yeah.
started with Atkins for me. We started
Yeah.
with a challenge in when I was working as a nurse on the floor at the
Uh-huh.
VA, and they said, "Hey, whoever can lose the most weight in the amount of time," and I
We
didn't
did
know what
that
to do.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
At
Same
the
thing.
hospital I worked at, we had Biggest Loser contests
Exact. I
for a few
won.
years
I
in a
didn't know what the
row.
heck I was
You
doing, but I
won?
won.
Oh, good for you.
I won.
Yeah, I did
But
Atkins back when Atkins was a fad.
yeah, I did it, and because
It
that's
worked.
what the ladies, the nurse. I was like, "Well, what are
Yeah.
y'all doing?" Because I had no idea. I didn't care nothing about losing weight. I didn't care nothing about any of that. I was
Yeah.
a fresh nurse on the floor and just
Yeah.
wanted to do it. So it must have been like 15 years ago. I'm, like I
Oh
said,
my
nurse
gosh.
of 20 years.
Yeah.
So, and that's how I started.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then ended up going back because doing
Yeah.
more research because I went down the
Mhm.
vegan and vegetarian trail and, and doing all the things,
Mhm.
being cautious about what I'm putting into my body and my children's body. And
Mhm.
I'm like, well, I know I'm eating
Mhm.
better than I did, but my
Mhm.
memory. And so that's where I just went
And
down
then
that
noticed improvements in your memory.
physiology. Yeah, and it was.
Yeah.
As I was losing it, I had to do the research to find out what is going on. Because
Right.
why am I so young and I literally can't remember anymore? I'm going into the room and it's
Yeah.
not coming back why I'm in this room. And so
Yeah.
that when that started going off, I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
something's
That's
not right.
frightening. That is
So
frightening.
yeah, and so the
Yeah.
thing with the
Mhm.
we know that this is the best,
Mhm.
one of the better remedies and one of the better solutions for a spectrum of things, because not only that, I was having monthly UTIs and yeast infections
Right.
and
Yes.
skin infections, and everything got better, but we
I
know that
relate
it's
to that. Totally.
yeah,
Had the
and
same similar experience, with those type of
yes.
things. So many just little odd and end weird symptoms and problems just seem to like go away. Yeast
Hmm.
infections being, something that women is really common in women. And, to change your diet and have that completely go away and never come back is amazing.
And never being able to put it together that it's diet.
Right.
Like I never like
Yeah.
that's why I love now my main thing now is insulin resistance. Insulin, this is
Yeah.
what I'm
Mhm.
like in the middle, that's what it, and all of these things are coming off of it because
It
literally I
is.
can say, yep, that was me, yep, that was me,
Yeah.
yep, that was me. The unfortunate thing about
Mhm.
all of that,
Mhm.
though, as you mentioned, even the person who invented the esters, and he was, she didn't live, the mom-in-law didn't live, your husband, there's a day, so we're not immortal.
Mhm.
But we know, why do we keep going then? If we know that this, we did it for our loved ones, but they're no longer here,
Right.
why do we keep going? Because still, even though
Mhm.
this might be the reality, we're not immoral. Do you explain that? Like you went ahead and said his
Yeah.
life was much better for those 4 years that he did.
Yeah.
And what would it have looked like if he didn't?
Oh, he was declining rapidly at that point. I mean, he was even having physical symptoms like tremors. He couldn't walk normally. He walked like shuffled when he walked, and he couldn't finish sentences. And people with Alzheimer's, they often describe it as having a dead look in their face. The personality kind of fades. They stop joking and whistling. He was a big whistler, he had stopped doing that. He used to crack jokes all the time. He had stopped, there were so many just everyday things, we'd have a conversation and his response would have nothing to do with what I had just said. It would start to get very lonely in my
Mm.
home, and all of that changed, all of that improved. And I got my husband back. He said it
Oh,
was like a
wow.
light bulb came on in his brain the day he started taking coconut oil, and
The day
he
he started.
the day he started, he said that
Wow.
many times, and his mood lifted. He felt like he had hope for the future, and I mean, he had been extremely depressed. I mean, even suicidal at times because he was aware he had Alzheimer's. He knew what he could do and what he couldn't do anymore, and he'd been the accountant for my practice, and for my medical practice for years, he was able to work from home because I was hospital based, working in the newborn ICU. So we were able to have our two children really because he was willing to stay home and work from home. And so I owed so much to him, for that I got to be a doctor and a mother, thanks to him.
Mm.
But then, he doing the accounting, he was always on a computer. And when he wasn't working on it, he was playing on it. And then he just started having weird problems with, memory related problems, forgetting appointments for the girls. Even if I call him a half hour ahead of time, he'd still forget to take them, like to an eye appointment or something. He had to start, he used to put a piece of tape in the doorway of something he was supposed to do with a little post-it on it so that when he walked through the door, it would remind him he was supposed to do something. But then
Wow.
he started forgetting if he'd been to the bank and the post office. And that was like a daily thing for him. And he started misplacing important mail, which were checks from patients, things like that, and it got really worrisome. And he was quite depressed, but he knew later we figured out he was depressed because he knew that he was losing these things, that something was really wrong. He told me that, and but a psychiatrist thought it was depression that was causing the memory issues and put him on an antidepressant, but he just kept getting worse. And, he was officially diagnosed then in 2004 when he was only 54 years old, diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. Yeah, 2 years later, he couldn't use a calculator or even turn on a computer. He couldn't do simple math. 2 + 2 = 4. He couldn't do that 2 years later. And
So we're
and
talking
that
not
was,
70s, but he was 50 something years old.
yeah, he was 56 at that point.
Wow.
And then 2 years later and 50 at 58, just all the things I was telling you about, the shuffling. He had tremors. When he would try to talk, his jaw would tremor, his hands would tremor. And he, was fading very quickly. He couldn't prepare a meal for himself anymore. One of our daughters moved back in with us after she finished college. She hated doing that, but so she could be there in the daytime to make sure he ate, when I was at work. And it was really hard on my family too, our two daughters, especially the younger one. She did so much to help us, and she basically stuck with us. And her husband now was a young man who came into our lives, and I got him trained as a nursing assistant, a CNA, certified nursing assistant. Him and another friend of my daughter's, and he ended up taking care of my husband. They did for 4 years, after things went south.
Wow.
And ended up marrying my daughter. So it
Oh, look at that. All divine
was a
connections,
whole
huh?
family thing. Yeah. But the whole, just to go through that and to know that you're not going to get to retire and enjoy each other into your golden years, that was devastating, really for both of us. And you know, um, people with early onset Alzheimer's, they have about a 7-year average lifespan from the time they're diagnosed until they pass away on average. It's
Mm.
often sooner than that, 4 or 5 years. And he ended up living for 15 years with Alzheimer's,
Wow.
when he
So
started
even
having
double. Wow.
obvious
Okay.
symptoms until he passed away. And I do attribute, the last 8 years he was on, doing these ketogenic things. We kept it going to the end, but after like the seizure, he actually stopped breathing. He turned blue. I came home from the hospital. He was still blue when I drove home. EMS hadn't gotten there yet, and so it was a really
Oh.
serious injury to his brain at that point, and he became disabled after that. And he had hugged me and kissed me goodbye and told me he loved me, just minutes before that happened. So it just
Had he had
changed.
a seizure before that,
No,
or
he'd never had a seizure, that we knew of. He had a couple episodes where he just suddenly fell back And looking back, I think maybe he had a type of seizure. They call it an absence seizure, where you
Mhm.
basically lose consciousness briefly. So he might have had that, but this was like a full-blown, what they call a grand mal or a generalized seizure, that he
Mhm.
had, and it went on for
Tonic-clonic,
20
yeah.
minutes. The
Oh,
first, then he had another one on the way to the hospital. So he became very dependent after that. And oh, it just changed everything again in the opposite direction. But it just that it all happened and the way it happened, he was what we call now a dramatic responder to ketones. Some people, it happens more slowly, like over a few weeks or months, they'll notice improvements and then stabilization. But some people have an obvious, very quick response like he did. And, it was just like the clock, you mentioned the clock early on. And um, the day before he started the coconut oil, really he was trying out for two clinical trials, basically 2 days in a row, two different centers. And I learned about the medical food, the MCT oil medical food studies that they had done, where half of the people with Alzheimer's that took it, even a single dose, and then people that took it for months, that they had it, half of them had improved memory and cognition, which you don't hear ever about any of the Alzheimer's drugs. So I was
no.
intrigued and I read their patent application. I found it was MCT oil, and I knew it was because as a doctor of premature newborns, we used to add it directly to the feedings of our preemies back in the 1980s. MCT oil would help them
Yeah, what
grow and
happened?
get home. So I knew what it was. I knew what it was, and I thought
Yes.
this might be available. And but I learned about it like it was like 1 a.m. when I'm reading about all this, and then he goes to try out for the study at 9 a.m. And so I didn't have time to do anything about it. And he needed to get a score of 14 out of 30 points on a test called the mini mental status exam. It's a 30
Mhm.
point test.
Mhm.
And he only got 14 points. He needed 16 to qualify for the study. We were so disappointed. And the doctor had him draw a clock. And it was just a few little circles, like four little circles and four numbers. And she said, he's on the verge of severe Alzheimer's. There was no big circle, nothing,
Mm.
It was very disorganized. And but the next day, like on the way home, I thought, well, let's go see what we can get. Couldn't find MCT oil, just wasn't very available at that time. But I did find coconut oil, which MCT oil is extracted from. I had learned that from the patent application. And
Mhm.
then I figured out, like from the composition, it's like 60%, medium chain triglycerides, MCTs. And I figured out how much coconut oil he would need to take to be equal to the dose they were using in the medical food studies. And so the next day he was trying out for the other, um, clinical trial, different location, all of that. And I gave him, it was a little over 2 tablespoons of coconut oil, put it in oatmeal because it was a little, it tends to be kind of a semi-solid,
Yeah.
creamy white, so you put it in something like coconut oil and it melts, and he had that and his testing was about 4 hours later and he gained 4 points from the day before. And it
Wow.
was things like he couldn't remember the season of the year the day before. The day of the week was different. He knew what the day of the week was. He knew what city we were in, which was different, and what floor of the institution he was on, which was different. So he gained 4 points, qualified for the study, and I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. I wasn't sure, if we just got lucky or what, but I started giving it to him like at every meal. I would give him the just over 2 tablespoons and for breakfast, and then I started adding it to every meal. And the reason being that when what I found from the patent application is that the ketone levels, when you took the type of MCT oil that they were using, which is called C8,
Mhm.
it increases ketones pretty quickly. Like it peaks at about an hour and a half, and then they're pretty much down to where you started out 3 hours later. And I
Mm.
thought, the brain needs fuel 24/7.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And so I just started giving them some coconut oil, which is what I could get my hands on at the time, each meal. And, some in the evening. We got everything. I got cookbooks right away, recipes galore, from the internet. And started drinking coconut milk, which was mostly coconut oil and just different things like that. And he just steadily improved, you know. The tremors went away fairly quickly. He started whistling and joking again. I mean, we're talking within a few days. And he said, the light bulb came on, and at 2 months, he could tie his shoes again, which he hadn't been able to do for a while. And he was walking completely normally, and he could run again at 2 months. And at about 3.5 months, by then I had also started giving him MCT oil, and I started mixing coconut and MCT oil and just putting it with a lot of his different foods. And he hadn't been able to read for a year and a half, and he couldn't explain why to me, why he couldn't read. And he just announced, this is 3.5 months after starting the coconut oil. He said, "I can read again." And I said, "Well, why couldn't he
Ah,
read?" Yeah, he could read again.
wow.
He explained, he said, the way he explained it was even interesting for somebody with Alzheimer's. He said, well, when he would look at the page, he said the words would go into pixels. He's described it like satellite breakup.
Oh
And
my
so he couldn't
gosh.
make out the words, but that had stopped and he could read again, literally just read the words on the page, and then started comprehending better. It took 2 or 3 months later. And then around 9 or 10 months, he could remember what he'd read hours earlier. He would tell me, I read this, and these were some of and he did so much better. He was able to work as a volunteer at the hospital where I work. He worked in the supply warehouse and helped with putting stickers on supplies and helping to deliver. And, it was just unbelievable. It was incredible. And, so, around the fourth or fifth day, we actually, like I said, he was very aware, that he had Alzheimer's and that he had improved. And we're like, our life has changed. And I started thinking, I could keep this secret,
Mm,
or there were at that time they were saying there were 35 million people in the world with Alzheimer's and dementia, and more than around 6 million or so in the US. And I thought, I've got to get this message out. This medical food wasn't going to come out for another year, and the publication was in a really obscure journal. It wasn't something that people would normally, even physicians would normally read. And they had a press release about it, but I hadn't really seen anything about it. And I thought, I've just got to make this known because coconut oil is on the shelf. And that by then I knew MCT oil was on the shelf too. And I thought, why should people have to wait for a medical food?
hmm
And the research they need to beef up this research, into this whole idea of ketones. I had made the connection with Dr. Beach too, early on, and just wanted to increase awareness of all that there was a ketone ester in development. It needed funding for research, all of that. So I just started writing about it. And um, one of the first things that happened was the Alzheimer's Association. They have a big international conference every year. And I found out that they were scheduled to have one just like 2 months after Steve started taking the coconut oil. He had improved so much. I thought, here's a golden opportunity to connect with researchers from all over the world. I mean, they literally have 5,000 researchers from all over the world come. They have about 2,500 poster presentations during this 6-day conference. And, I just wanted to try to stimulate research, see if anybody knew about it. And so I wrote up what is called a white paper, self-published, but it was a case study about my husband and all about, what happened with him, the coconut and MCT oil, but also about Dr. Veach developing the ketone ester. He needed funding, to do clinical trials in Alzheimer's. The NIH wasn't coming forthcoming. They weren't providing the funding for him to do that.
right.
And so I had arranged to have a table in their exhibit hall to provide this information that I had written up, and paid for the table. I think it was 1,600 and something dollars, and had 1,500 copies printed up in Chicago. My sister and her husband were going to come with us. They were going to man the booth with Steve, and I was going to go to the conference as much as possible and try to talk to researchers about ketones. And even though I sent them the article and they approved it and they took the money about 3 days beforehand, they told me that I could not have an exhibit that in the hall. And but I
Mm,
could come to the conference, but I couldn't have an exhibit. And I
wow.
argued back and forth. First, they told me it was because I didn't have a corporation. I said, "Well, I'm a physician. I do have a corporation." Well, then they had all these like other arguments, and that they wouldn't let me do it. And they said I couldn't pass out copies or whatever, you know. But we had all these copies in Chicago printed up. So we went and, I attended the conference and I talked to as many researchers at the poster presentations as I could. Anybody that had anything to do with nutrition or insulin or glucose or, anything or fatty acids, I would stop and talk to them. And I did slip about 200 copies
Good,
into people's
good.
hands.
Oh,
Yeah. And,
we
but
are in
they,
an uphill battle with this. It's
it
still to
was.
today. You still to
Oh, it is.
today.
It's still an uphill
Because,
battle.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
was
they won't
listening.
acknowledge it. The crazy thing is the Alzheimer's Association has funded research now for ketogenic diet, for MCT oil, and that has these studies have shown good results. And they've been presented at their conferences. I've been at the conferences where they've presented these, the results of these studies that were funded by them. And yet they still won't acknowledge that MCT oil or coconut oil, they say there's not enough evidence, studies haven't been conducted. I mean, they still say that, and
Mm,
it's not true. And they
mm,
funded them and they had them presented at their conference. So it's really a mystery to me, that they won't acknowledge it. And, when you look in the exhibit hall, they have these massive exhibits from the drug companies. They're their biggest donors. They donate millions of dollars to the Alzheimer Association every year, and they won't. They really don't seem to
that's why. Yeah,
recognize the role of diet and that something as simple as a ketogenic oil could make a difference, for
yeah,
people with Alzheimer's. And it's kind of mind blowing because they're the people that are supposed to be looking for the cure, and
yeah, they're not.
being, yeah, and
Just,
and raising money, for the cure, but there's, something that could help that could actually improve memory and cognition, and they won't acknowledge it. It's really sad.
it is. Yeah,
It's
we are
really
definitely
sad.
working against a
Yeah.
big, they call it big pharma, big food,
Right.
all the things, because they
Hmm.
are big. They'll take you
Yeah.
out if they can. So
Yeah.
we must be careful, but all we can do is keep grassroots boots on the ground and keep
Hmm.
our neighborhoods, the people that are closest to us, whatever we can do in our
Right.
sphere of influence to keep
Hmm.
talking about it and
Yeah.
keep going. And that's why, I'm doing a free library
Mhm.
tour right now and doing things for free
Mhm.
right now. It's about reversing insulin resistance and type 2
It
diabetes,
is.
but at the same time, it's gonna hit and help everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't have diabetes. I wasn't diagnosed with pre-diabetes, any of that.
Hmm.
But I was losing my memory, and everything else was pointing
Hmm.
to the fact that there was something going on in my body
Hmm.
that was related to a metabolic issue. Because
Hmm.
when I took away the food that was causing it and added what I needed, it
Hmm.
got better.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is, they won't let a simple cure, we can't call it that, we know,
Yeah.
but
No.
they
Yeah.
won't let it be known.
They won't let
Same
it
with
be known.
cancer and everything.
Mhm.
It's a
Sugar
cure.
is,
There's
yeah.
things out there that will,
Yeah.
dramatically improve and reverse a
Yeah.
lot
And
of things.
the diet is probably number one.
Number one, if we do
It's
that
number one.
first, if
It
we
is.
start out with getting rid of the
Mhm.
ultra processed food, sugar and
Yes.
carbohydrates, do that first, a
Right.
lot of the rest of the stuff we don't even need to venture into,
Yeah.
because those three things right there will help improve
Mhm.
probably the vast majority
Mhm.
of the population.
Yeah. I
But
totally
then
agree.
we
Yeah.
have to identify you could
Yeah.
be addicted, because we have a big addiction
Mhm.
issue, I believe.
Yeah. Big sugar
Y-
addiction issue. Yeah.
Yeah, sugar
Yeah.
addiction. So
Mhm.
if we can
Mhm.
heighten people's awareness to that, and
Mhm.
then say, why don't you try this?
Yeah.
We'll see it. We'll
Yeah.
see it. But
Yeah.
unfortunate. Well, now with everything that's going on, with the Mahi and all that, I
Mhm.
think Tampa was the first hospital that just changed their dietary rules,
Hmm.
which is amazing. I think
Yeah.
that happened this week or last week.
Wow, I
Yeah.
had not heard about that.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
They just hired a chef, brung them in, and they're getting rid of all artificial sweeteners.
The Tampa
And
General?
I don't know,
Yeah, one
Tampa
of the
something.
hospitals in Tampa. Oh yeah.
Yeah, Tampa something. It must have been one of the big hospitals, but they've
Uh-huh.
completely
Yeah,
changed their diet. They
good.
bought a chef in, and I guess there's a pledge that they can do, the Maha
Mhm.
pledge,
Uh-huh.
to get rid of these things. And
Yeah.
so they're the first hospital in the country
Yeah.
that came on board. So
Yeah.
we're right here. We're at the cusp of it. So you and
Yep.
I and all the pioneers and everybody that's been
Mhm.
doing these things, I just feel like we have a little bit more hope than what we've had before because on a national level, we're talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you on the nutrition thing too. And there was a little bit of an evolution of that, with my husband and I. And, in medical school, I had 3 hours one afternoon on nutrition. That was it.
Oh, that's
4
the
years of
answer.
medical school. And even now, I mean, I've heard some institutions have maybe 9 hours. And we're not talking credit hours, we're talking literal hours of
Mm,
nutrition. There's so much emphasis on pharmaceuticals.
yeah, practice
And
medicine,
right.
So,
And that's how it's very oriented that way. And so, I really I totally bought into the low fat dietary guidelines. And was eating skim milk. I thought I was eating healthy cereals and
somebody
cereal,
said snack wells.
right. Yeah.
I was like, what
Yeah,
is
all
that?
those low sugar, low carb ice cream. I mean,
Low
everything
fat.
low carb.
Yeah.
And I got heavier and heavier
I
and
was gonna say
heavier.
low fat, not low carb. It was low fat at the
Low
time, right?
fat. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I low fat. Yeah, low fat. And I was really about 60 pounds heavier than I am now.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so we're, at the point my husband was diagnosed in 2004, I was really at my all-time high weight, at that point.
Mm.
And I was always on a diet. I was
Yeah.
always, I wasn't just like
Paid
picking
attention.
out and binging or, anything.
Exactly.
I was eating, low fat, but you're hungry all the time. That's the problem. They talk about food noise now and the GLP-1s and all this.
Hmm.
Food noise, sugar does is a
Hmm.
big creator, I believe, of the food noise. And so,
Yes.
he gets diagnosed in 2004. And in 2006, I'm always trying to read about the research and the latest findings and everything. And I read a study that an Alzheimer's study that showed that people who ate with Alzheimer's who ate the most Mediterranean-like diet lived on average 4 years longer than people that ate the least Mediterranean-like diet.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I had no, that was the first time it ever occurred to me nutrition could have anything to do with
Mm.
Alzheimer's disease. And so, I mean, like I said, I was at my all-time high weight, and I researched the Mediterranean and just other potential diets. And I thought, okay, the Mediterranean diet looks really good,
It has
and
its pros.
yeah, and we were on the fast food, convenience food diet. You
Right.
know?
Anything was better than that,
Yeah,
honestly.
a lot of ultra processed. I'd get these
Yes.
meals, because I'm a physician, I've got emergencies, all this kind of thing.
Right.
I'd get these big things from Sam's Club, family dinners, and it had, they were really ultra processed foods, much of it, and probably eating a lot of high fructose corn syrup, trans fats. Everything was loaded with trans fats
Yep.
at that time too, and which are very harmful,
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
and so we've switched from the convenience food diet to a Mediterranean diet, whole grains, and
The
we started
rice.
eating salmon. I started cooking with, olive oil, got rid of soybean and, some of these other oils and fresh vegetables. I just hadn't even tasted like fresh vegetable. I
Right.
just
Wow,
wasn't
this is
into it.
good. Right. Yeah.
I ate corn and lettuce, I mean, and so I found out how much I actually liked number one cooking, actual
Mm.
cooking, and eating fresh vegetables and cooking fresh vegetables and salmon. I thought, gosh, I actually like salmon and other kinds of fish, and so completely redid our diet. And this was 2 years before the coconut oil. I think that made me a little more receptive too to the idea that
Yeah.
a food could have something to do with Alzheimer's. And he did decline during that time, but
Mhm.
it's hard to know. Did it slow the decline or, I don't know. there was nothing to compare it to. But for me, I ended up losing I lost actually 94 pounds over 3 years.
Wow.
And I had started going to the gym and all of that too, at the time. And, some of it has slipped back on, but I've still kept off 60 pounds for all that time. And, you know, uh, uh, so when I started writing, I thought, this is the other thing that people need to really clean up their diet. That's a huge problem, and the sugar is the problem. I started learning about how harmful diabetes, having chronically high blood glucose is. It creates these products called advanced glycation end products that
Yeah.
damage
The ages. Yeah.
literally any cell in the body can be damaged by these
Hmm.
things. It's very harmful in the brain, the heart, I mean, many tissues. Um, it really probably explains what happens, why many of the complications of diabetes that
Yeah.
people experience, kidney failure,
Yeah.
blindness, I mean, and again, skin deterioration, needing amputations, I mean,
Yep.
horrible things like that happen, to people that don't control their blood sugar, and so many people, they have diabetes, but I started for a while doing these home health risk assessments for Medicare. After my husband passed away, I did hospice for a few years and saw every, horrible thing you can think of. That people, the end results, of a lifetime of, in many cases, a really poor diet.
Yeah.
And then I was traveling a lot, speaking and all of that. And I started doing a job called home health risk assessment, where you go to someone's home and for Medicare and Medicaid. And I could do nutrition counseling and all that, but I could learn from them too. What were they doing? And there were people, with type 2 diabetes that were on 4 or 5 different diabetes medications and insulin. And I said, did you ever get counseling for your diet?
Nope. They
And
don't
they're
have.
like, no, no. And they're drinking Coca-Cola for breakfast, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, extreme amount of sugar and needing all this medication and having all of these complications, related to it. And it was really eye-opening, to have that experience. And, I was able to talk to them, what is a carb? People don't even know what is a carb.
They don't know the difference between a carb and a calorie. And
Right.
even, yeah, because I the same. I was a home care nurse for 20
Hmm.
years. And so
Hmm.
peeking behind those curtains and
Hmm.
seeing exactly what's in
Hmm.
those homes,
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, I know that you're doing the thing. I know that you're doing it. And I'm
Hmm.
sorry that we are not teaching you
Right.
better. There was,
Exactly.
and even with the teaching, it's
Mhm.
wrong a lot of
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
I followed after a lady who was in a diabetic coma. She ended up in a coma in the middle of the road, spinning around in her motorized chair
Oh my
after
gosh.
having gone to the endocrinologist. The endocrinologist sent her somewhere to go learn how to eat. And
Mhm.
after following it to a T, that's how she ended up. And that's
Oh.
why here in Orlando, my goal is to open up a center
Hmm.
to make sure that you're getting the right teaching, a metabolic health center, because
Hmm.
it's
Yeah. That's
I
great.
can't, people cannot keep going to these diabetic education centers and becoming sicker. They're still telling them eat 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrate
Yes,
per
they
meal
are.
plus
Yeah.
15 grams of carbohydrates in snacks. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you're not going to get better. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, and then the thing is, well, I just need to maintain it. I was coaching somebody on the radio recently for like 14 weeks, and we started out putting a continuous glucose monitor on him.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, now I know what to do. I can see what
Hmm.
I ate, and then I know how much insulin to take." I said, "That's not the point. We're
Nope.
not trying to do this for insulin, how much insulin you're going to take. We're doing this so we can tell
Yeah.
that your
Yeah.
body is doing something
Right.
and it's responding to the sugar and carbohydrates so you can be aware, and
Hmm.
then we can get you off of that because you're going to stop eating the thing
Hmm.
that's causing the problem,
That's
not so that you
awesome.
can take more insulin."
Right. That's awesome. And I totally agree with you on that. And oh gosh, it's you're kind of blowing my mind because yeah, you're just so tuned into all of this, and it's really awesome, what you're trying to do there. And there are, some really good studies showing that reducing carbohydrates can really help reverse type 2 diabetes.
Oh
And
yeah.
are you aware of Dr. Eric Westman at Duke University?
Yep. The
Yeah.
Verta Health studies,
Yeah,
all
Virta
the
Health
things.
and
I
all of
love
this.
Verta Health. That's the one of the another
Yeah.
ones that,
Yeah,
yeah.
because people can literally get off insulin. Dr. Westman, I interviewed him for one of my books, and I've gotten to know him, from various conferences. But he's been he went to Atkins' office.
Yeah.
He
He
he had a
studied underneath
patient,
them and
right? He had a
challenged
patient.
him.
Right. In the 1990s, he had a patient that had lost 50 pounds and told him he went on the Atkins diet. And he's like, whoa, this is interesting. This is before he started doing, what he's doing now. And but it inspired him. And so he told me he went to the bookstore. He found all these different books on different diets and all this, but Atkins was the only one that was actually still practicing of the books that he found. So he contacted Dr. Atkins and shadowed him, and then Atkins funded his first study, of using really a low carb, Atkins
Yeah.
type of diet for people with diabetes. And so he's been doing that ever since, helping people with
Yes. I love Dr.
type
Eric
2
Westman.
diabetes and obesity. And
Fully
he,
functioning clinic. 6 months
yeah,
waiting list. Last I knew, that was years ago, though. It's probably longer than that.
yeah, he told me he'd had over 4,000 patients that had gone into remission. And he
Yes.
starts them, if they're on insulin with type 2 diabetes, he stops their insulin right away when they go on the diet. And because their blood sugar drops so
It
quickly,
drops. Yeah.
then they have to worry about hypoglycemia.
Hmm.
So he has
Yes.
them stop their insulin. And then he said many people are able to completely wean off all their medications within about 6 to 8 weeks. And
Yes.
some are months, because of how long they've had it and how severe the insulin resistance is. But over time, many people are completely get their fasting blood glucose, hemoglobin A1C down to completely normal levels, when they
Yes.
do this. And he said about 50% seem to be able to maintain it for a year or
Hmm.
longer, but that's more than almost any other diet, the weight
Ever.
loss and everything
Yeah.
else, the low blood sugars that you get. And Virta Health is, that's another, online, where people can do telehealth, to do this type of, very low carb diet. It's very helpful, for people with diabetes. And, when you look at Alzheimer's disease, there are studies showing that at least 80% seem to have type 2 diabetes
Yep.
or a high fasting blood glucose. And
Yeah.
insulin resistance is a major part of that problem of getting glucose into the brain. The brain itself can have insulin resistance without other
Yep.
organs in the body having it.
Yes.
So that's a big factor in why glucose isn't getting into the brain normally in people with Alzheimer's disease. So there are actually several case reports. Her name's Dr. Kelly Gibbous. She's a nutritionist, and she has done studies of ketogenic diet, but they, also do exercise and some brain games and that kind of thing. But these are people with Alzheimer's that go on a ketogenic diet who also have, either prediabetes or diabetes. And um, the case reports, after 10 weeks on this keto diet, um, they get their blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C all come down. Even their blood pressure improves, their weight comes down,
Yes.
even their cholesterol, all those levels improve. And there was a man who had mild Alzheimer's. That 30-point test, 23 out of 30 points he was scoring, which kind of put him in the mild Alzheimer range. I need a sip of water.
Go for it.
Hmm.
Fire.
And after 10 weeks, his score went from 23 to 29.
Wow.
And in 30 is 29 or 30 is normal. So
Yeah.
he was would no longer be diagnosed with mild Alzheimer's. And there was another lady, her mini-mental status was 21. She had metabolic syndrome, which is like prediabetes.
Yes.
All of her
Everything.
numbers improved. I'm losing my voice.
Take your
And
time. It's
her
okay.
mini-mental status went from 91 to 98.
God,
So these are
yes.
people who actually were diagnosed with Alzheimer's that had that much improvement just from, going on a ketogenic diet for 10 weeks.
Yes.
And it wasn't like the highest fat version of the diet either. I mean, they were aiming for ketone levels of 1.0 or higher.
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is considered mild nutritional ketosis.
Yes.
So,
That's amazing.
yeah,
I
that's
love
it's
that
a
because
lot
I
of.
actually got a testimony from one of my clients that I coached this morning who called she we have a prayer line that we do every morning, and she
Mhm,
came on a prayer call, and she
mhm,
said, I ever since we started working with you that
mhm,
my I've improved so much. So she
mhm,
started working with me because she had been laid off on medical leave because she was a preschool teacher,
mhm.
and they noticed that she was slipping and losing her memory, so she
Oh
was
no.
diagnosed with that
How old
early
is she?
onset. And
Mhm,
she testified this morning. She said, "I passed all my tests. I no longer have this, and I'm actually going to go to the disability office to
mhm,
get my disability retracted because I." The papers show that I don't need it anymore. And I'm
that's great.
like, this woman got her life back. And that's what I coach. You know, I coach down to the ketogenic level. And then another lady who we were talking about reversing the diabetes
Mhm,
too,
mhm,
neuropathy. She had diabetic neuropathy. Her feelings started to return to her feet within,
mhm.
I think, 2 weeks of the coaching.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so it's amazing. And that's why I'm like, I'm staying right here
Mhm,
because I
yeah.
can see things from the brain all the
Mhm,
way down to the feet literally getting better. We reverse so many, and it's probably the easiest thing we can do is
it
reverse
is.
type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we're on this, we got to meet up. You and I
Yeah.
have to meet up
Yeah, we do.
together and do
We're
some
not that
things.
far from each other.
Not a, I can drive 1 hour, you can drive the other, I'll drive all the way there. I
Oh,
don't mind. I
sounds
don't
good.
mind
Yeah.
because yeah. So what are you currently doing, Miss Mary?
I'm actually working on an article. I've had a few published articles. One was about saturated fat and the flawed studies
Oh,
that they were actually combining trans fats with natural saturated fats when they studied fats, dietary fats,
yes.
and they never really separated them. And then so they tell us saturated fat is bad for you, you know. So I had that one published. I worked with Dr. Fabian Dayrit. He's a PhD chemist to write the article. So that was published in 2024. And then last year, I had an article on there's this question about coconut oil raising your cholesterol levels, a myth that's been around. I had so many people, but won't it raise my cholesterol if I take coconut oil? So
Yeah, your good cholesterol.
yeah,
The
it's
good
mostly
part
the
of the
good
LD, yeah, it
cholesterol.
still
Yeah,
may raise the LDL, but it's going to be the big
yeah.
fluffy things that are wonderful for you.
Exactly. So, we did a study. It took 2 years, these two papers. It was just really intensive to collect all the data. But it was 26 coconut oil studies, studies in which they were usually comparing coconut oil to another oil. But I looked at just the coconut oil group, and it was studies conducted from 1985 to 2024. So there were
Wow.
26 studies, 984 um, like results of from baseline lipid values to end of the coconut oil period lipid
Mm,
values. And when you combine all the data, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. It was almost zero change in total and LDL cholesterol. I mean, it was actually below the best baseline, but less than like 1% below the baseline. And HDL went up by almost 6%,
mm,
and triglycerides came down by almost 3%. And
that's what we
when
want to see.
the data for individuals was like all over the place. So some people would have a big increases and others big decreases, mostly in the short-term studies that we're talking, the ones that are 3 to 7 weeks. And I mean, if you introduce like something like probably any kind of oil or any other nutrient that you haven't been taking, your metabolism has needs time to adjust.
Yes.
Like in the long-term studies, the variability was much narrower, the standard deviations, as we call it. But
Yeah.
so that one got published in 2025, and now I'm actually working on two papers. One is more about coconut oil and the health benefits of it and the mechanisms behind the health benefits, related to the fatty acids that are in it. But the other paper I'm working on is on it's really on ketones, and we mostly think of it as that it helps produce ATP, the energy molecule
Hmm.
ATP, in place of glucose. But there is a lot more that the ketones actually do. And there are other papers on this, but this is even another take on it. So it's a little bit, I'm keeping it under wraps a little bit, but that's what I'm working really intensively on that. And I hope to have that one ready to submit, for publication in the next month or so.
Oh, yes. Oh, so you're in the thick of it right now, getting it
I
all the way
am.
in there.
Yes, I am.
Oh, thank you for your work that you do.
Oh, you're
Gosh, we need to
welcome.
read this. I mean, because that's where doctors are. You're in their wheelhouse. They'll read a publication. They'll look at the
Right.
evidence because everything needs to be evidence-based
Yeah,
studied.
everything has to be evidence-based
And so they'll
and
look at that
yeah.
and they'll be like, okay, hopefully the doctors will take it upon themselves and not wait for the government or anything else to tell us what is right and what is wrong
Yeah.
because it's going to be always skewed because they have the big pharmacy companies and the big food companies in their ears.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, it may be all good. It's why it took so
Yeah.
long for the food pyramid to come out because
Yeah.
they know that those studies that were presented even in 2020 were amazing studies
Hmm.
to say that, lower carb diet would is the ideal one, but they rejected it because the last people that had to review it was the food and pharmaceutical companies.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
now
Yeah.
we're on the other side of that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
hopefully,
Yeah. I
hopefully,
think this change is especially good for children too, because, for school lunches, at SNAP programs, all of
hmm
these, food programs that help, people that, don't have the best economy for their family.
hmm
Um, for so many years, children, well, they have to abide by the dietary guidelines.
that's right.
So
It's
at two
the
years old, little children were already put on a low-fat diet. And, you probably
yeah,
saw My Plate, you're familiar with My Plate, and then
yeah,
there
of
was My
course.
Plate for kids. No fat on the plate. And the milk, like they would have like a glass of milk, say encourage dairy, but when you read it, it was low fat and fat-free dairy.
Mm.
And that
So
has
what for,
reversed. And
right?
I think that's just so bad because, you think of breast milk, it's over 50% fat,
Yeah.
and over half of that fat is saturated fat.
hmm
There's got to be a reason for that. And, so, you know, as an infant who's breastfeeding, they're eating a low carb diet, really, that's
Yeah.
higher in
They're
fat.
born in
And then,
ketosis, the
right.
children. So it's
And then to be abruptly changed
hmm
to a low fat diet,
yeah, which is high
extremely low
sugar.
fat diet. Yeah, that's high
Low
in
fat equals
sugar.
high sugar. Yeah, because
Yeah.
they replace that fat with sugar because of the satiety. They have to
Mhm.
the flavor. They have to give
Mhm.
something.
Yeah, and I have a bit of a discussion of that in that saturated fat article, that I wrote.
Mm,
But like in the WIC program, the program for women, infants, and children
hmm
that supplies food, they would only allow, fat-free and low-fat milk,
Yep, I was
and
on that program.
41% of the preschoolers were
Yep.
already overweight or obese
Yep. Big
in the
boxes of
WIC
cereal
program.
that we would get. We would get the juices. We could get juicy juice, long as it was 100% juice.
Right.
Big blocks of cheese
Yeah.
that I don't even know if it was
Mhm.
real cheese. I can't remember. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But
Probably
the
reduced fat cheese.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was probably
Yeah.
some type of other cheese, but it was a good grilled cheese sandwich. I got to admit,
Yeah.
because I was on WIC,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it made a great grilled cheese sandwich. I tell you,
Yeah.
but it is. And then Similac or Enfamil was the only two choices that we would have to give to
Right.
our children. And
Yeah.
then if not, it's the soy milk. My children were on soy milk because they couldn't
Mhm.
tolerate the other stuff, and
Yeah.
they would still
Mhm.
throw up the soy milk. And of course, we know that's a big endocrine
Yeah.
uh
Issue.
it
Yeah.
affects the
Yeah.
endocrine
Right.
system. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean they're set up from the beginning to like not
Failure.
be set up
Yeah.
to fail right from the beginning. And
Yeah.
but that's the thing, like in home care, I'm seeing the patients. So I'm from Michigan. It
Mhm.
was normally like 70, 80 years old with diabetes and all the things. And
Mhm.
then, the more years that went on, I'm seeing, okay, you're 50, you're 40,
And
And
you're
then
already
they bring in their
disabled.
little
Yeah.
with the same disease process, and then they bring in their
Yeah.
grandson. They're like, yeah, he was just diagnosed with fatty liver. He was just diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I'm like, that something has got to give.
Yeah.
And whatever
Mhm.
I can do right now to get the
Mhm.
word out, I'm
Mhm.
doing it. I'm writing books,
Mhm.
speaking at places, doing whatever it takes, giving information. I'll give it to you free if you're in a low income neighborhood. But,
Yeah.
at some point, I got to make some money. We got, you
Yeah.
know, but
Right.
it
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
I love what you're doing because you're continuing to do the studies, continuing to write the papers. So being able to get this to the ones that will read it and
Yeah.
change their minds on the
Mhm.
higher level, the physicians and the
Mhm. Yeah.
nurse practitioners and the nurses and
Mhm.
the people who actually read medical articles and things like that. It's
Mhm.
needed from every spectrum, from the lowest to the ones who are
Yeah.
reaching those places. So I
Mhm.
really admire your work, and I thank you that you're keeping on going because
Thank
you've been
you.
fighting it for 22 years. It sounds like in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thick of
Very
it.
long time.
So,
Yeah. And yeah, well, like my book, really from the beginning, we had already switched to a Mediterranean diet. So I have really encouraged people to go on a whole food. It
mhm.
doesn't have to be Mediterranean style. I mean, that type whole food diet is adaptable to almost any culture, any country, any type of diet. Um, but, just trying to encourage people to do that because it just kind of naturally helps bring your blood sugar down.
Yeah, it's a
If you
starting
eat whole
point.
foods,
Yeah.
it's a good starting point. You get rid of things like high fructose corn syrup, just refined sugars, aren't really part of that diet, and
Yeah.
refined grains aren't part of that diet, a whole
Yeah.
food diet. Just getting rid of things like that. The diet is much better than you can imagine, I think. And like for me, the food noise went away after about 3 days, instead of constantly thinking about my next meal and
You
just
don't have
having this
everything that has
constant
the bliss
stimulation.
point.
Yeah, from sugar, going on a Mediterranean diet, it just naturally reduces how much carbohydrate you're eating and the
Hmm.
types of carbohydrate. It improves the types that you're eating. And I found after like 3 days, I was no longer thinking about my next meal all the time.
Hmm.
That constant craving just kind of went away. I'm hardly ever, I mean, this has been 20 years, that I've been on that diet, and I'm hardly ever just really hungry,
That's good. Yeah,
even if I don't get to eat, for 6 or 8 hours, I'm okay,
that's
but
good.
I would have been like panicky, think I was going to die or something, before I
Yes.
started going on that diet. And, it's just, it's really worth it. It's really worth it. 20 years ago, if you had told me 21 years ago that I'd be eating this way, I would have like looked at you cross-eyed, like I wouldn't have believed it.
Mm.
But then, it's just you read and learn, and
Yeah, yeah, it's
yeah,
definitely anything
yeah,
from the standard American diet going
yeah,
toward more whole things are better. And
yes,
it's just getting the word out,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I do believe that is a continuation or a continuum depending on how sick our cells are.
yeah,
And a lot of, the work that I think Dr. Kim Berry and the team is doing with the
mhm,
American Diabetic Society,
yeah,
their statistic on metabolic health, 93% of people are metabolically um,
unhealthy,
unhealthy.
unhealthy,
So
yeah,
yeah, so it's I
mhm,
mean 7% is like
right,
doing well. I'm
yeah,
like, where you at? Because I don't see you right now. So yeah, the
mhm,
more we get it out, the better it is. So I
yeah,
truly admire your work and thank
thank
you
you.
for being a pioneer and doing all of these things. Again, I just wanted
Mm,
to read over your books that you have, or
okay.
did you want to just tell us your books and where we can
Well,
find
yeah, I
you?
actually have them here. I can show them.
Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is the third edition of my first book. Oh, I don't know if you can see it very
Yeah,
well.
the background
Oh, I've
sometimes.
got the
There
blur.
it is,
Okay,
right there. Right
okay.
there. Alzheimer's
It's
disease.
called
So
Alzheimer's disease. What if there was a cure? The story of ketones.
I love that
Um,
one.
so this is my third edition. The first one was 2011, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
nice.
So you have more
It's the
additions.
first book because so much has improved in the research.
Wow.
So you can read all about the Mediterranean diet and exactly whole food diet. I call it a Mediterranean style diet, because it's
Yeah.
very adaptable. But you can read about
Yeah.
that, and then Um,
The good thing about keto is that you could
yeah.
do that in a Mediterranean, and you can do
Hmm.
vegetarian keto, all the
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
vegetarian, even vegan is conceivable. They just
It
need, a
is
lot
hard
more
though.
oil and
Yeah.
but it's conceivable to do it. This is clearly keto for healthy brain aging and Alzheimer's prevention.
I
And
love it.
this one, it goes beyond, it talks a lot about diet, but it goes into many other different things that people can do lifestyle wise,
Okay.
not necessarily related to ketones, but just many different things that people can do that could help reduce their risk of developing Alzheimer's or dementia.
Good stuff.
And it has the last chapter is 80 pages long. And I
Mm,
actually wrote it first. It took me about 10 months to write it. It's on what goes wrong in the Alzheimer's brain.
mm.
It's highly referenced. I think physicians will get more out of it than the average person. It was going to be in my first chapter, and I thought nobody will ever get to the rest of the book if I make that the first chapter. So I made it the
Oh,
last chapter in the book. But so that's, you can learn so many different, things that people can do. And then this book I wrote, it's called The Coconut Oil and Low Carb Solution. This one's thinner because um, I really needed to put out a book that was not so heavy on the science.
hmm.
A lot of people get lost in the science and they don't get very far into the book. So this one's a little bit simpler. It has my husband's story in it too. But it's got a lot of recipes and it really talks about how to include, coconut and MCT oil, how to work it into your diet, just with everyday, meals that people make. You just substitute it for other fats in the diet and for other carbs in the diet, the ones you should be getting rid of. And it talks a lot about diabetes and the damage, from having a chronically high blood glucose and that type of thing. And then this is actually probably the book that sells the best, I
Nice.
think, because
That
it's
might be one out because I'm about to go to a assisted living facility. I'll bring it
uh-huh.
as a resource.
That would be great. Yeah,
Yes.
this one, could be good. I probably should do another edition of that one. It came out in 2015, so
Not too
my
bad.
husband's story
About a
wasn't quite
decade.
done, and there has been a lot of research since then. And then my last book is called The Complete Book of Ketones.
Mm, it's
And
a great book.
this one I wrote to go beyond Alzheimer's. There are so many applications of the ketogenic diet. Cancer, it's being studied heavily now for
Yeah.
as an adjunct to cancer treatment. So people would stay on their standard treatment, but they go on a ketogenic diet and it can help potentially slow the growth of a tumor, slow
Yeah.
down the cancer. And this is because so many cancer cells thrive on sugar.
That's
There
right.
are
The very test they used.
yeah,
Test it.
exactly.
And
You're
Dr.
feeding the
Thomas C.
cancer
Fried.
cells. If you're eating a
Yeah.
lot of sugar, eating a high carb diet, you potentially are feeding the cancer cells. And going on a ketogenic diet can slow it down, by just, depriving these cells of just abundance of sugar, that
That's
people are
right.
often consuming. So cancer is one of them, but there are many other things I talk about. And I interviewed 16 different people for it. And they were Dr. Richard Veach that I mentioned earlier, who developed the ketone ester, several of the really elderly ketone researchers who have all passed away now.
Mm,
Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, he's at University of
hmm.
South Florida. He's very prominent in the ketone space. A couple physicians who are practicing that type of care, other neurologists who are studying ketogenic diets and MCT oil, and dietitians. I have a couple of dietitians who have been helping children with epilepsy and children with cancer, and now adults. They also, help manage adults, but they've been in that space for years, helping
Nice.
people who want to be on a ketogenic diet, but I like to include their background stories, what inspired them when they were a young person, a
Oh,
child or a young
nice.
person. So I got them to give me the details, what led to them wanting to do this. And um, so, it's really pretty interesting. And then I just go into the nuts and bolts of how to do a ketogenic diet. And all my books have gobs of recipes for
Love
people who
it. I
need them.
love that. I
Yeah.
wanted every one of them. So I'll be picking them up. But yeah,
Yeah.
because I'll be presenting this coming Wednesday at a assisted living facility with Dr.
Okay,
Nelson
good.
Vasquez, who
Mm-hmm.
was under Dr. Kiltz.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll be, we'll be putting on something, a free event there to talk
Mm-hmm.
about metabolic health and insulin resistance.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
hopefully we can keep pioneering this thing to where we can get into different areas like that, where you name the school system, but it's the school system, the hospital, the prisons, all of
Mm-hmm.
the places that have to follow that federal
Right,
guideline
federal
of
guidelines,
nutrition.
exactly.
And
Yes.
so the more we can, whoever's taking that lead, wherever we can get in, we should be
Yeah,
educating them because they're going to be looking for answers.
yeah.
How do we do this? Because there's this
Mhm.
dramatic change, and this is all we've known. Even though there have been iterations of the food pyramid, it's
Mhm.
pretty much been the same. It's not been big, hairy changes. This is
Yeah,
the first time ever where the
yeah,
change is so significant
yeah.
that
They
it's kind
literally
of
flipped it.
the opposite of
Yeah,
everything we've known. So they need
right.
the education, and people
Yeah,
like us need to get in there and kind of tell them about it. So,
right. Yeah, I'm excited about that. And if people want more information or links to my books or whatever, I do have a website. It's coconutketones.com. So that's spelled COCONUTKETONES.com. There's no Y in ketones.
no, it's not.
I think if you put my name in, it will often, and coconut oil, it will often pop up with that website.
Good stuff. Then you got a great SEO situation going on.
Mhm.
That, yeah.
Yeah.
So, where else can we find you, Dr. Mary?
Well, I'm on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. The handle there, it's Mary Newport MD 5950 is the one that has the most information on it. I've got a couple of others that are older and I kind of let them go, whatever, but this one, I have a lot of podcast interviews, informative kind of videos, that type of thing. Many of my presentations are on that YouTube channel.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you look up Mary Newport MD 5950, that's the best one, on YouTube. And I am on TikTok. I haven't put anything new on there lately, but I have little blurbs
Oh,
on there,
TikTok.
about how to use coconut oil, how to use MCT oil, and, that type of thing. And LinkedIn, Instagram, other, social media. But probably my biggest thing where you can get the most information would be on the YouTube channel.
Nice. Okay. Well, I
Hmm.
look forward to it. We are definitely gonna keep in touch.
Yeah,
Uh-oh,
and
my
this podcast will be on that channel too.
Oh, sweet. Good, good, good. Let me plug in. Well, I think we can probably shut it down, but thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you for
welcome.
all of your work that you're doing. Keep
Hmm.
pioneering this thing and yeah, we'll stay in touch and you all know how to get in touch with her. This is Dr. Mary Newport and I am TaShawn Davis, registered nurse, host of the whole Health Beyond Weight Loss podcast. And my goal is to reach 1 million people and turn it around. We want to reverse 1 million type 2 diabetics in my
Mhm.
lifetime. So thank you so much,
That's
Dr.
awesome. And
Mary.
thank you, Tashawn, for inviting me and for helping to spread this message. It's really
Yes,
awesome.
it's powerful.
Yes.
Yes. Alrighty, my friend. If this episode has helped you understand your body a little bit better and helped you have the confidence to make better informed healthcare decisions, share it with someone you know who may be struggling with sugar cravings, brain fog, or fatigue because they may not even realize that blood sugar could be the reason. And also leave a review because it really helps more people find this. Remember, the goal is to reverse 1 million type 2 diabetes in my lifetime. And as always, I want to remind you the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And some people are fighting every day just to have the health and energy to live their everyday life that they were called to live. So I am praying for your health. I am praying for your strength. And I'll see you in the next episode.